Take a trip with us to Nilbog. Just promise not to drink the goo.
Oh my God!
If you get sucked into the Matrix, we will sing the phone for you.
Do you believe in fate?
But every movie has a plot hole, and every hole gets filled somehow with whiskey, wine, or blue milk. Just don't cut me off right now. We're the Plotaholics, a breakfast club of two. We're the Plotaholics, ripping plots apart for you.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Plotaholics podcast. I'm Shane Wilson, and I'm joined as always by the little to my Richard, Brian Tan. Mr. Tan,
That was a good one.
welcome in.
Thank you.
How are
Welcome
you
to
today on this lovely of loveliest Sundays?
It has been a very, very mellow day, and I would sell your soul for a mellow day.
We are, yeah. Well, good. You got one.
Yeah,
So no
I
soul
hope you're not.
selling needed.
Yeah, that's true. Or was there?
Oh my God. I did wake up feeling a little light on the soul today, so but that's okay because Chadwick Boseman filled it back up with the funk.
Yes, he did. And it's funny is that before he was cast as Black Panther, he was the biopic, the black biopic king.
He really was. He was playing every major black male character.
Yeah, I mean, he was Jackie Robinson, then he was James Brown. I mean, who hasn't this guy been? Hadn't he been?
He hadn't been Brian Tan.
That's true. That's a good point by you. But I mean, you look, he was in 42 as Jackie Robinson. He was Thurgood Marshall. Right after, about the same time as he was, a year after he was T'Challa. I mean, goodness gracious, for a guy who only had 12 years of filmography in movies and television. Oh my goodness, this guy.
For everything that there is to say about Get On Up, the advertised content this week, I feel like most of our attention here will be paid to Chadwick Boseman, who just so one of my chief complaints about biopics a lot of the time is that the leading actor or actress tends to just offer us like a really good impression,
a caricature,
right?
If you will,
right? A good impression of this person.
Yeah,
but you are always sort of keenly aware that what you're watching is an impression.
Right. I mean, for as good as Rami Malek was as Freddie Mercury,
right?
I mean, he was doing a Freddie Mercury impression.
But Chadwick Boseman here disappears into this part.
Yeah, and you've heard me say previously that I really love actors that are method. I love method actors. I'm a big fan of method actors that lose themselves in their roles. Heath Ledger, amazing method actor. Jim Carrey, an amazing method actor. For the most, whether you love him or hate him at this point in time, Johnny Depp, method actor. And in this film, Chadwick Boseman goes method.
I think method acting can be very good, but it can also be
It's frightening. It's frightening because you lose yourself.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But sometimes it can also be like a little like self-aggrandizing, right? Like the Jared Leto brand of
I was just
method
getting
acting.
ready to say Jared Leto is when method acting goes wrong.
Yeah, it's just like,
because it's
just
also
dial it back a little bit, right?
Some people that go into that method, they're very, very pretentious, right?
Yeah,
it's like I'm so much better than.
Right, because I'm an actor.
I'm an actor. I like to fart in the tub and bite the bubbles.
But here, I was like really like pretty blown away by his performance as James Brown. Like it was like watching James Brown.
Can I be honest with you for a minute?
Yeah.
I've never really been a James Brown fan. I mean, I appreciate what he's done.
Yeah, that's me too.
But I'm never, like, you would never hear me, oh my God, James Brown. James Brown! Like, you're never going to get that out of me. You're just not.
I mean, to me, like his importance as like this mythological sort of figure, that is like largely his own construction.
Yeah, I mean,
is obviously like a very important. He's an important fixture in music history, especially in American music history.
A lot of what James Brown did still influences music to this day.
Absolutely.
Case in point, Bon Jovi's band are employees of his.
Yeah.
And James Brown was one of the first ones to do it like that.
Well, now, in terms of what he did for the music business, this is something that I was like a little less versed on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of all of the things that he was doing. Like, this is a theme that comes up over and over again. There are two parts to music. There's the show and the business.
Yeah.
And if he could be both sides of it. And this is something we talked a couple of weeks ago about Beyonce and Jay-Z. They have mastered that. I think Taylor Swift has mastered that.
In her own way, yeah.
Right. I mean, she is a show and she is the business. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And, you know, like, say what you will about her and her music and the way, like, it maybe, I mean, it's not for us, right? Like, music is not for us.
I mean, I'll tell you what, I think a lot of Taylor Swift's music resonates with me a bit more than you would think.
Oh, really?
In a lot of ways.
I'm kind of a closet Swiftie myself, but I'm also not ignorant to the fact that music isn't made for me.
Correct.
I just kind of like it, but that's also,
I enjoy it, but it's not.
Right.
Brian
that's
Tan
also
was not on her mind.
Right, but that's sort of the whole, that's the mission of mainstream pop music, right? Is to make something that's accessible to everybody.
Correct. But I really think that James Brown, and there's even a scene when James Brown, of course, is played by Chadwick Boseman, is having a conversation with the man that would be his manager, Ben Bart, played masterfully by Dan Aykroyd.
Right.
And he was saying, look, I know I only had a 7th grade education. And then he just breaks down just what he's seeing and how they can circumvent. And it's like, that lets you see just how smart he was.
Yeah. Now the idea,
depending on how much of that is factual and not just dramatized.
There is a bit of like, I don't know, contention among like critics of the film that say that some of it was like mythologized a bit more than it needed to be. Right. And I don't know which aspects, right, of it necessarily are, but just the idea that you would pay a promoter in a city to help you get the word out about your show. And like, no one had thought to just like approach the radio stations for like, you know, like it was like crazy to me that this was even what the landscape looked like, you know?
Well, you also remember too, this was also around the time of payola.
Right.
So I guess
there's a little bit of that going on here too.
A lot of that is shown as well. Yeah. And I mean, but you also heard how Dan Aykroyd's character said it. It's just the way it's always been.
Yeah.
So it goes to show maybe it's just a sort of a system that's in place and everyone is just groomed to go with the system.
Yeah.
And once again, and that's the issue that I have with these biopics, is that you never know if what you're watching is real or not. And because you hear all these stories about how such and such as a state approved this, or in the case of Bohemian Rhapsody, oh, well, all these biopics wanted to be made, but Brian May wouldn't allow it because they didn't want Freddie to be painted in this light or blah, 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 blah. So it's like, so how are we going to get the true story? Like, there's no way to know.
These folks, entertainers, especially, I mean, I guess this is a global thing, but especially in this country, entertainers from around this time period, I would put like Michael Jackson in this crew, Prince, like I would include Beyonce, like as more recent examples. Like they become larger than life and they become myths, like more than people, you know?
Yeah.
And like much like the way that we think about our founding fathers, right? Washington and all of those guys and how we've romanticized them.
Yeah.
so much. I think we do the same thing to these artists who like here. I like that the film doesn't shy away from some of the shittier things that James Brown does,
Right.
but it
Yeah.
still at the same time is painting him as something of like a
A
larger than
tragic
life,
figure.
a tragic figure, right? Like he's a victim of circumstances, right? Even when he's beating his wife.
Right. And, you know, pulling a shotgun on people because someone took a dump in his bathroom. I mean,
Right.
it didn't look to me like did it look as though the bathroom was like completely and utterly labeled as James Brown only, do not enter?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, like if you're just walking by and you got to pinch a loaf, then I mean, you got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, like let's just say if I, Brian Tan, I had a private bathroom and blah blah blah.
Okay.
And somebody went in there, pinch a loaf. I come back and I noticed that someone was dropping deuces in my bathroom. Well, me being a reasonable human being of sound mind and body. Now, granted, we find out later on in the movie that James was high as a freaking kite.
That's the thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I would like to think that even if I was drunk and or high, I'm not going to get a shotgun to prove my point. I might go in and embarrass the person and just say, you know, seriously, you couldn't just go to the public bathroom like 5 feet away? Why'd you have to go pinch a loaf in mine? Well, at least you flushed and left it in better care, you know, left it in decent care. But I don't want to smell your mookie stinks.
Mm.
I'm not going to pull a shotgun on the room. I mean, that's just rude.
So like let's get into some of the this is biopics or movies that are strictly presented as nonfiction are always so tough to talk about when it comes to story stuff.
Yeah, because it's hard to determine what's, you know, we've already said this.
Yeah.
How do we determine what's real to critique?
Yeah.
And what's
So
just
all we can really dig into here is like the choices that the filmmakers made in terms of how they wanted to present the story that they decided to present. So
Right.
I'll float my first question to you as how do we feel about the non-linear story, the jumbled up chronology?
I mean, I like, sometimes I like a non-linear told story, and sometimes I hate it. Sometimes I really hate it. Like in the case of Pulp Fiction, I absolutely love it because it makes it all come together.
It works really well there, yeah.
In this, I mean, I guess it's kind of okay because you don't feel like you're bored. You know, just when it feels like a scene might be going too long, you go to something else and it sort of jars your senses. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think for this film, that's one thing that worked very, very well. Is that when it feels like a scene is sort of running its course, we're taking to something else that sort of freshens it. You know?
Yeah, I didn't hate it here either. Strictly speaking, I thought that it was like a pretty good way of doing things. And especially when we are presented with the fact that he's so all right. Let me before I talk too much about that, let me ask you my second question, which is how do we feel about the occasional fourth wall break with James Brown actually talking to the audience?
I mean, I'm a fan of it. There are times when a fourth wall break is very, very good. I love it in Deadpool. I love the little bit of it that we see in the She-Hulk trailer, and I did like it here. I mean, I even liked it in the Ving Rhames made-for-TV HBO film about Don King. I enjoyed the scenes of that when it was a fourth wall break. Right. There are aspects where a fourth wall break can be very, very good, and it can be very, very fun. So I kind of like that because it almost seems like when he does it, he's answering questions that we, the audience, have in that moment. And it really works, I think.
For sure. Yeah, no, I don't have any specific beef with it either. So I guess I'm trying to so I believe that that both of these things, the nonlinear story and the fourth wall break, are characteristics of storytelling that should have like explicit purpose, right? Like they shouldn't be used. A lot of times fourth wall breaks or narration or voiceover can be used as a crutch to fill in gaps of story.
Yes.
Sometimes nonlinear storytelling can be used as a gimmick to make things look more interesting when they really aren't as interesting as, as a way of like trying to spice up a story. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so here I am, I think, markedly undecided on both. There are times when the fourth wall stuff really, really works for me, and um, and it's not, and it's jarring in the right way,
Hmm.
and it makes sense to me that James Brown would break the fourth wall in his movie because he's such an arrogant dude.
Yeah.
Like he's like, let me explain it to you, right? Like that's what like the same thing he does to Bobby and Ben in the movie. Like that's what he's doing to the audience, right? Let me sit you down and let me explain it to you.
Yeah. Here, let me educate you because you're not smart enough to be in my
Right.
movie.
And so to that, I like that because that's very on
It's
character
true to
for
the
him.
character. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
And
then
my
when we, as I think that the nonlinear storytelling also matches in an interesting way because that's sort of like if you think about what he does in the film when he's talking to his percussionists and how he wants them to play off of the beat a little
mhm,
bit, and then he
right.
wants like he's trying to create this like new rhythm, and that's sort of what nonlinear storytelling does, right? Is that it
Right.
kind of works against what we would consider like traditional narrative, right?
Well, and that's exactly what he even says to Craig Robinson's character is, look, music is still music. Even if it doesn't make musical sense, it's
Right.
still music.
So cinema is still cinema, even if it doesn't make cinematic sense.
Right. And I just went on thetake.com and they're talking about the factuality of the film.
Okay, let's get
And,
into it.
and here's a couple of things. According to the side by side historical comparisons, Get On Up is quite legitimate in its broad stroke representations of Brown's personal story. Yes, he really took part in a one armed blindfolded boxing fight as a child. Yes, he really met Bobby Bird in prison. Yes, Little Richard really encouraged him to get a record deal. And yes, in 1988, he really went into an office building with a shotgun after someone used his bathroom, then led the police on a 14-car chase. I did know about that. I remember reading
Yeah.
about that in Jet Magazine. As with any biopic, the screenwriters took a few liberties to spice up some details and make a good film narrative. For instance, there's no record that Brown's plane was actually shot down over Vietnam. No Brian Williams
I was
situation
about to say, like, he pulled us a Brian Williams there.
Nor did his estranged mother actually show up backstage at his performance at the Apollo. And though she did abandon Brown because of a violent relationship with his father, she was in and out of his life more frequently than the film implies. During the time Brown lived in his Aunt Honey's brothel.
See,
And
now that's important to me because the filmmakers here decided, like, made a conscious choice to make the mother relationship a bigger deal in the story than it probably ultimately was if she was in and out of his life more frequently. Like,
right,
it wasn't this like grand gesture that she like showed up at his show, you know.
right.
But
Oh,
but the film made it a much bigger deal that she like showed up.
right. Oh, and here we are. And despite the name, the real Aunt Honey, who used to lock Brown in closets and tell him he was ugly, wasn't as cheerful and sweet as Spencer's version. These disruptions, and then of course it's some other details surrounding the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination of the concert. It was an oversimplified, chronologically speaking. The film has Brown finding out about King's death while recording Mother Popcorn, which wasn't recorded until '69. Brown's diffusing of the tension at the concert in Boston was undoubtedly brave and even a risk of his life. Some ulterior motives were at play. Brown refused to go on stage until Mayor Keith White agreed to pay him. He used the night's tension to his advantage, and those actions were still deservedly considered heroic. So he wasn't just super, altruistic. I'm going to put on
Right.
this show.
Well, and I think that they show that he's not like that when he's like behind closed doors with just his management and everything. He's like, no, we're like
Right.
booked to play there. Like, we're not going to take the night off.
Right, exactly.
And then whenever he approaches the mayor, he sort of like spins it a slightly different way, right?
Right, exactly.
And almost threatening, right? Because like, if all these people aren't at my show, then they're just going to be rioting in the streets. Like,
Right,
you need me there to keep them calm.
Right, like, oh, James Brown, the voice of all black people.
Right.
Now, keep in mind,
And I did sort of feel like, I'm glad that you said that because it felt like the way that they presented it is like Martin Luther King Jr. is dead. There's this vacuum. Like, does James Brown step up and become the voice of the generation, you know?
I'm James Brown. I'm going to lead all black people.
Pretty solid.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that scene where they were like, where the folks were like rushing the stage and everything was intense.
Yeah, I mean, because you see the cops throwing them off the stage. It's looking like It's almost looking like a video game.
Right.
It looks like a side game in Saints Row where you're like the bouncer and like people are rushing up to the person you're supposed to protect, and you're just like hurling them like
Right.
500 feet away like they're nothing but paper. And then he's
Yeah.
like, "No, you embarrassing yourselves. You embarrassing James Brown."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like it is interesting. I think it's a tall order because I think that James Brown obviously very important.
Yes.
Obviously very influential, but also kind of a dickhole.
Little bit of a urethra, definitely. That's
And
for
so
sure.
it's a tall order to make a movie about a piece of shit and make us like him. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
or find ways to like redeem him in some way. And obviously like our country and I think just people in general have long been struggling with the concept of how do we enjoy the things that terrible people make when the things that terrible people make are actually good things sometimes, right? Like how do
Yeah.
we
I still love
we've
Harry
talked
Potter.
about that here. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm still, and I'm going to continue to love Harry Potter. I am a Potterhead. I disagree wholeheartedly with J.K. Rowling. I wish she wasn't such a closed-minded douche canoe, but she is. And maybe one day she'll wake up and see the light and stop being an asshole. But until that day comes, I have no love for her. But the thing is that, and we've also talked about this before too, that when you as an artist, when you create something, it's no longer just yours.
It doesn't belong to you, right?
It doesn't belong to you anymore. The rights to it may belong to you,
yeah,
but the thing itself does not belong to you. Just like when you're a parent, your child does not belong to you after a certain age. Your child is their own person. Does Brian Jr. belong to me? I mean, theoretically, as his father, yeah, but he's his own person. His mind is his own. His soul is his own. I can't control his mind, body, and spirit. Just like, no more can James Brown control what his music does for us. And I think that as an artist, that's what you want. You want your art to live on so that even after you're gone, no matter what, it still resonates with people.
Right.
And James Brown is one of those that I think that his because he is so sampled, among the most sampled artists of all time, there's no way that his musical influence is ever going to go away, no matter how bad of a person he was.
Right.
I mean, Ike Turner was probably 1,000 times worse, but he's more forgotten because of the fact that he was nowhere near on the James Brown level.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Bill Cosby. The Cosby Show will probably still live on, but not him.
Yeah, eventually we might get back around to where.
Oh, I still own all 8 seasons of the Cosby Show on DVD, and I have no desire to watch them. Now, maybe one day that will change. But I'm not going to get rid of those discs because I remember what the Cosby Show meant to me as a child.
Absolutely.
So, but I think that this is a biopic that's a lot braver than some.
Yeah, it doesn't look the other way on his transgressions, but it probably does paint them in much broader strokes.
Right. Like case in point, when you look at Great Balls of Fire. Yeah, it doesn't gloss over the fact that he married his 13-year-old, I think, third cousin or whatever. Right. But they make it look like it was more so mutual and they just sort of fell in love. It's like, dude, you manipulated that child.
Yeah.
You manipulated that child.
Yeah, and then I mean, like, so to me, there's the scene in Get On Up where he is like Christmas and he walks in and he like knocks her around for like dressing like sexy Santa Claus lady.
Yeah, because his white neighbor was staring down at her cleavage. Now, number one, Jill Scott is a gorgeous woman. And Jill Scott is curvaceous and amazing. And I'll tell you what, like, you ain't seen what she was wearing beforehand? For real? And how you gonna marry a gorgeous, curvaceous woman? And I know that, But come on, dude. Really? If you really had an issue with that, then maybe you should have said, hey, listen, maybe we should be a little bit more conservative.
At the
But
same time,
but
that's not his job.
No, it's not your job. Because here's the thing. If Sharon comes up to me and asks me how does something look on her, 9 times out of 10, I say, I think it looks good on you. How do you feel it looks?
Yeah,
well,
right.
I think I might want to change. Okay.
If you're comfortable, if she's comfortable wearing that and she wants to wear that, then that's her. Like, let her live her life. You know,
and
like
maybe you should feel a little bit more confident in your relationship.
That's the thing, right?
That if somebody look at your woman's breasts in a cleavage format, you ain't getting mad at her.
But this movie is so quick to remind us that he grew up in that sort of situation and that this is the model of like marriage that he saw, you know, because there's so many times in the movie where like he is all of a sudden, we see that little boy again.
Yeah.
Right. Like that played him when he was young. And like that just to remind us, like, remember, like this kid, like,
remember his life sucked as a little kid.
Yeah. So, you know, right. And when he hit her, he walked toward the camera and like looked into the camera as though to say, like, I know that was shitty, but like, don't you remember like how shitty my life has been? So isn't it like kind of not okay, but like understandable? That seems to be the stance that the movie takes on a lot of the bad things that he does. And I don't know that that's a stance that I can necessarily support.
I can't support that either, because here's the thing. After a while, you've got to recognize that you're upbringing
and of course, statistics would show that violence begets violence, right? That if you grow up in an abusive household, then you typically grow up, or maybe not typically, but
you have abusive like tendencies,
right?
And all right, yeah,
and of course, in this time, it was not likely for any man to go to seek any sort of like therapy or anything like that, much less somebody in James Brown's position, right? Because it's all for him, it's all power and sex and rock and roll and all of that, you know,
right?
Like, he's the greatest, right?
Right. Well, see, I also think too that it's a sign of the times, and I think that when we watch, I think another issue that I have with biopics is that we see the way life was then, and we see it through our own scope of now.
Yeah.
And yeah, we know that it's wrong and we know that it's bad, but in that time frame, I mean, it's hard to watch movies like that because we judge it by what we see and how it is today.
Well, and in order to make, you alluded to this earlier, in order to make these movies, they have to please the estate to a point.
Right.
So you'll never get like the James Brown story where we really see what was really going on.
Just how terrible it was.
It's a miracle that we got even this version, because like you said, this one does stare down the barrel a little bit more than a lot of them do.
Right.
We do see him beat his wife. We do see him do the drugs. We do see him be an asshole a bunch.
Yeah, and I think that in this film, the one thing that Chadwick Boseman does very, very well is that he makes us still love James Brown, the character.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to, that's why a lead actor is so important.
Mm-hmm. Well, this dude so like, we were talking about impressions and all that earlier. Like, James Brown inarguably had charisma for days when he was on stage, right?
Yeah. Wasn't the handsomest fellow in the world. But...
Right. But Chadwick Boseman is able to capture that swagger and that charisma and that confidence and all of that stuff so well.
Right.
It's just it's really good. We had another really funny he says the honky tonk, like when he was like performing for the white kids, in all their sweaters.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
man.
was pretty funny. That definitely took me back to Dreamgirls.
Right.
Like, that really took me there.
And then like they did this juxtaposition hopping back and forth between like the black club and then this place, like playing the same song and how they would play it differently.
Right.
And it was really interesting and funny.
Right. Yeah. And then of course he was like, how many times I done that split? About 1,000, 2,000. Like, the only time I done split my pants in front of white folks in that ugly sweater.
Right. Yeah. No, that was funny there.
I definitely want to talk about some of our supporting cast in
Yeah,
this
we
because
got
the
to give
supporting
love to Craig Robinson.
dude, Craig Robinson, every time he's on screen in anything, he steals your eyeballs. I mean,
Yeah, he's good. He does not get enough love, you
he
know?
does not, but you gotta love the Nick Weber.
Yeah.
Nelson Ellis, who played Bobby Beard. Nelson Ellis, for those that aren't aware, played Lafayette in True Blood. So when you see the those clips on the YouTube of the gay black cook that goes up to the rednecks and beats the holy shit out of them, that's Nelson Ellis, who played Bobby Beard, who we lost a few years ago as well. There's a lot of folks that are in this film that well, not a lot, but it feels like a ton of people that are
Well,
in this movie are dead now.
when you think like about the void left behind by Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, then it reminds you. Well, then now Nelson Ellis, Viola Davis, who's amazing in everything she does.
Yeah.
I love the dynamic of her and young James, and then when he's an adult, she was like, "I never wanted to be a mom."
Mm-hmm.
That was hard. Lenny James as James Brown's dad. Lenny James, of course, plays Morgan in the Walking Dead universe. It was weird seeing him in this because I'm so used to seeing him in The Walking Dead. Dan Aykroyd, we already mentioned. Brandon Michael Smith, who played Little Richard, absolutely amazing. And the last thing I'd ever seen him in was in Gridiron Gang with The Rock.
Oh,
that was the last thing I remember seeing him in. And then for like the 5 nanoseconds, we had the Rolling Stones on screen.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And I mean, and Octavia Spencer, obviously.
Octavia Spencer, like, how do we not talk about how great she was in this as well? I mean, there's some heavy hitters in this film, and I really feel like, especially using Viola Davis as an example, you want to talk about someone that's just getting better and better as the years go on. I mean, now she has this this new film coming out in about a month or so that I can't wait to see. The Warrior King movie or something. I can't remember exactly what it's titled.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. Jill Scott, even. Wow. Like, I wish we could have gotten a bit more of Jill Scott.
Yeah, I felt like she was
misused. She wasn't used well enough.
Yeah, for a 2-hour, 20-minute runtime, basically. Obviously, it's Chadwick Boseman's show, so we should get a lot of him. But I do feel like we missed out on spending some time with some of these other characters. We got a lot of Ben Bart by Dan Aykroyd. He's great here. Bobby Bird, same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have used a bit more with Viola Davis for sure, and some more Jill Scott.
Yeah, a little bit more Little Richard. I mean, come on.
I would have loved more Little Richard. He was so good.
That's the last time those guys talked.
Right.
But I like how, though, and it really makes me laugh, the racial dynamic, because James Brown just didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
Everyone called him Mr. Brown. He called everyone, like, I love how Frankie Avalon comes up, James, blah, 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 like, you can call me Mr. Brown.
Right.
And Frankie Avalon's like, Urgh.
Yeah. Even like, I mean, I just love, like, they're like, we got you this car and here's your chauffeur. And he's like, how much are they paying you? They're like $600 a week. He's like, here's $600. Go get yourself another job.
Right? He's like, I drive myself.
Right. I love that. Like,
that was good. That was really
like,
good.
That's not your car if you're not driving it, bro. Like,
right. Like, that's someone else's car. Come on.
Yeah.
Now. I even love the fact that the Ken and Karen not wanting to, they wanting to swim, but they can't.
I know.
And we didn't come there to swim with no entertainers. Like, but then they're dancing to his music.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, like this movie really hits on a lot of points.
It does, and as soon as it gets like really close to like really getting into something, though, it pulls the ripcord. Yeah.
It's like, what? Too much of that.
Like the MLK, like that stuff in Boston was so close to like going somewhere. And then it like took its foot off the gas, you know?
And that's part of my issue with this film is that and we've talked about this, God, how many times? It almost feels redundant at this point.
Yeah.
that this is a film that once it starts to say something, it stops talking.
Well, and this is the thing about music. Music, especially more than almost any other art, is explicitly connected to the political and cultural moment that gave birth to it. And to ignore all of that stuff, especially when you're looking at Black artists or minority artists, like, of course that stuff is important. And to acknowledge like the death of Martin Luther King Jr. in this film and in this story, and to recognize its place in the James Brown story, and then not like ride that out to the bitter end and like see like let it actually be something in the story is a real disservice, I think.
I agree, especially now where music it's not doing that anymore.
It's all icing. It's no cake, right? Like it's just like we're gonna put this Martin Luther King stuff in there because it's gonna make the movie feel like it's saying something, but it doesn't actually ever say it.
Right. And I'll tell you the truth.
That's what Dreamgirls did too.
It really did. And I really like, honestly, I think that if we get a Zach De La Rocha biopic, I really hope it doesn't do that.
Yeah, like who would be like the biopic that would be, because I feel like, and I haven't seen Rocket Man or Bohemian Rhapsody.
I have no desire to see Rocket Man. I've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, and I'll tell you what, for me, it's copy and paste by the numbers biopic.
Yeah. And that's kind of my beef with all of these, is that
I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of this genre.
You take, right, I'm not really either. You take whoever the lead person is and just swap them out with you know what I mean? Like you could take Get On Up and essentially sub in any Black artist from the last like century, and you'd basically have the same movie.
For the most, yeah.
You can do the same with like you do
just
Walk
different
the Line
names.
And swap that out with any white artist from the last century.
I'm pretty sure Walk the Line could have been Hound Dog, the Elvis Presley story.
Right.
Minus the fact that Johnny Cash wasn't with a underage girl.
Right. And that Elvis movie that just came out, I'm interested in seeing it just for the sole purpose of knowing how they address all of the things that we've been talking about over the last few weeks with Elvis and his like the theft of intellectual property and things like that. Right. Like, because if it shies away from that stuff, then it's guilty of the same sins as all of the rest of these movies. Right. Which is they glorify their target or their subject and
they gloss over their weaknesses.
Yeah, for sure. They might be like, "Hey Elvis, do you remember that time you stole all those songs from those Black people?" And he'll be like, "Uh-huh." And then
yeah, mama.
Yeah. Right.
I sold the music from the Black man. Oh.
Yeah, and then that's it, right? Like for the rest of the time.
I put on a Black man's blue suede shoes.
But then I tell you, like, they would take a moment like the MLK Jr. assassination and play it way up in a movie like that, right?
Yeah, Elvis is like devastated at Martin Luther King's death because they met one time and it was so profound, and Elvis was going to steal his suit.
He like dedicates Amazing Grace at one of his shows, like in his like bedazzled jumpsuit to Martin Luther King. He's like, "Tonight I'm wearing this black jumpsuit in honor of the Reverend." Like,
but it's like his face is like Martin Luther King's face is like airbrushed on the seat of his pants,
right?
And he's like shaking his ass, so it looks like Martin Luther King's going.
Right. Yes.
Like I would seriously watch something like that and just be like, "Huh, well."
That was something that they could have done in Dewey Cox, right? Like let Dewey Cox respond to this like huge like racial situation.
But it's not Martin Luther King. It's like Malcolm LeVar Barron or something.
Right.
MLB.
Senior.
Or the fourth, because you know, why not? But you better be but you don't want to
Bishop Marvin.
Dude, you don't want to get into this racial tension. You don't want any of that shit. But
I
I
don't know.
do want some of that shit.
I don't know. What does it do? Well, it makes you seem like you care, and everyone will know that you really don't. It'll be super awkward, and everyone will turn against you.
Oh my god, I can actually see him doing that too. That's
right.
The best part.
He's like, I think I do want some of that shit.
I'm actually visualizing it. Like I'm seeing Tim Meadows' face.
Yeah.
And his mouth is moving, but your words are coming out, and it just
do you
fits.
remember when, like, at the beginning of the pandemic, when Gal Gadot and got all those celebrities to sing "Imagine"? Yeah. It was so cringy, dude. Like, that's the kind of shit that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's like you're watching. It's like, you tried.
And they made fun of that in The Boys.
Yes, they did. Yes,
it was so funny.
And that's why The Boys is one of the greatest bits of television out today, because it does what South Park does. It looks at the climate and it heckles the hell out of it. But you know why you don't hear a bunch of well, Boys is nothing but woke liberal media. Is because The Boys is ultra freaking violent, but they're too dumb to realize that they're being made fun of.
Yeah, I don't know. That final scene in The Boys this season was like pretty on the nose.
Yeah, it was, but
they're all wearing their red ball caps and like
if
cheering for the fascists.
If you didn't pick up on that by now, then you've got a problem.
Right.
I'll tell you what though, that the great thing, one of the best parts about Get On Up, and we've already said it, we've said it a few times, is the fact that we're not shying away from the meat and potatoes of the fact that, look, this movie does not shy away from us seeing. And yeah, James Brown is a jerk, was a huge jerk. He was terrible to people. He was disrespectful. And because he was having financial issues, guys weren't getting paid. And then he tries. Now, the one thing the film that bothers me about the film also is that each of those band members went on to have successful careers without him.
Yeah, well, they're all very talented.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry, Craig Robinson. He's gonna be okay no matter what he does.
Yeah, Craig Robinson is gonna be fine.
What's funny
is the guy that he played.
Yeah. Well, I think what was really great, though, was that my son started to watch it a little bit with me. And he goes, hey, it's Daryl from The Office.
Yeah. That's what you love to see it.
Yeah, we've been binging The Office since he's been here. We've been binging The Office. Good. Matter of fact, he was really pushing. He was using his political clout to get me to purchase Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah.
And then we actually saw, you ever hear that game Meme This?
Yes.
Well, apparently they had an Office version, so he used his political clout for us to purchase that as well.
Right.
So, yeah, he's been watching The Office and using some of his clout quite a lot.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yep. But I'll tell you though, this film at the end of the day, what I think it does right is, with its runtime, it shows us who James Brown was.
Yeah.
And yeah, hardest working man in show business, Mr. Dynamite, Soul Brother #1, and all this, that, and the other. But it also sort of shows, like I already said a few minutes ago, just he wasn't a good guy.
Yeah. He's a salesman.
Right. But the thing is the one thing that he really shows, though, is why he was like that. He always had to look after himself. So it's implied that he always keeps everyone at arm's length.
Yeah.
And uses them for his own means. And he wasn't really shy about it. I think like the only person that he showed any true love toward was his son.
Yeah.
But we also didn't get a lot of that. We only got a couple of scenes of that.
Again,
that's another problem.
That's another thing that I felt like we were missing. And that's I think the struggle with a biopic, especially about a musician, because they want to give us so much of the music,
right,
that we end up losing the story. Like you've got like 20 to 30 minutes of music in any of these movies,
right?
Like just like live performances, you know.
Right.
And I think that there has to be a way that you can honor that part of the legacy while still like giving us the rest of the story through montage or whatever.
But I think one of the issues that we have, though, too, is that our run times. We worry about the run times. We always worry about the run time. But I'll tell you what, if you have a compelling story and you have good writing, you can tell a biopic story and get better than this with a 3-hour runtime. I mean, come on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. If Avengers Endgame can tell a compelling story in 3 hours, you can tell a person's life history in 3 hours.
Yeah.
And have a good, compelling narrative. Because I don't care how many times I watch Endgame, I never feel bored. I
Right.
don't feel like I sat down for 3 hours for a movie.
So I would I'll save that for our ratings.
Okay.
The Get On Up. We just breezed through this, huh?
A little bit.
$30 million budget, grossed $33.4 million at the box office, so it made its money back. But that's about all you really want from a biopic, right? Like your biopics are Oscar bait. They're not trying to break the box office open.
No, they're not trying to make art. They're just trying to get Oscar nods. Because those Oscar nods are what get you to the big paydays, right?
Right. It is currently sitting at 80% on the tomato meter with a 68% audience score. I think that the real rating is probably somewhere between those two numbers.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I really think though that this film, I think Chadwick Boseman's, and I mean, you know what? Why don't I save that for the rating as well?
Yeah,
I'll do it too.
Yeah, so let's get Bartender Smiley in here, and then we will. Uh-oh. Goodness, it looks like my friend has gone away. So welcome into this part of the show where I try to stall for a few minutes while I try to get Brian back. There he is. Hey now.
Because I accidentally hit my connectors.
It's all good. So here is Bartender Smiley.
Yeah.
The Plotaholics rating system for the movies is a pretty simple system. Basically, they rate movies based on how many shots it takes to get through them. So if you got a good movie and you get through it all the way sober, then it takes 0 shots to get through the movie. And then if you got a really bad movie, then it could take up to 5 shots to get through the whole thing. I think you can try to figure out the middle part yourself. So what can I get you?
You know, if you collected all of the spilled liquor when you're pulling shots, how many additional shots could you get out of a bottle?
I don't know. Probably one or two. It depends on how you're pouring. If you're pouring them like Bartender Smiley does, then you probably get a few. But I try to protect the spillage.
You're good at what you do.
I do. I am, I should say. So what would you, Sir Tan, give this film?
This film, honestly, even with the heavy hitters, especially with Chadwick Boseman, the story in and of itself still kind of falls flat to me, and I feel like it really, really wastes the performances that we get. This is a middle of the road 3-shot film for me. Never gonna watch it again. And it has nothing to do with the fact that maybe it has a lot to do with the fact that I was never really I was never gonna trip over myself for James Brown. But I really just feel like this wastes the performances of Chadwick Boseman, Nelson Ellis, Dan Aykroyd, Viola Davis, Craig Robinson. The list goes on and on and on. I really feel like this film falls into the same copy and paste, cliche, cookie cutter BS that all biopics fall under. But you're also not even here for a story plot. You're just here to get an insight on the life of a famous person because it's on screen.
Yeah, and you might as well just go watch a documentary. That's always been my belief on this stuff. Like, if I wanted to know the real James Brown story, I would go watch a documentary because these movies never give you the truth. Like, not the full unfiltered version of it anyway.
No, not at all. So this is a very, very middle of the road 3-shot.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that the film is a 3-shot film for sure. Very middle of the road. I'll never watch it again either. But I will say that the performance of Chadwick Boseman is worth watching at once because he's so good.
Yes. Chadwick Boseman's performance is a 0-shot.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Absolutely. His performance is it's so good. It's as good as it could be in this particular role. Like, the only way to be a better James Brown is to be the real one.
Yeah, and Chadwick Boseman had that talent that he could be a great version of. I mean, hell, his role in 42, dude, Jackie Robinson played himself in a biopic, And 42 was way better than that. Okay? How do you play Jackie Robinson better than Jackie Robinson plays Jackie Robinson? Well, when you're Chadwick Boseman, you can do that.
Yeah. All right. So that's
Get On Up. Very, very middle. I mean, this is one of those rare instances. Well, not rare, but rare-ish, where your story is garbage, but your cast makes it worth watching.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you. 3 shots on this one. Give it a single watch. You like the Boseman performance alone deserves that.
Yeah. Don't thumb it down on your Netflix, because you don't want to thumb down Chadwick Boseman.
Right. But that being said, Mr. Tan, next week we are going to be getting into Purple Rain.
Purple Rain, Purple Rain.
So that should be exciting.
But Shane, I have to ask you this. Maybe you're just being a little bit too demanding. Maybe you're just like my father.
Is that right?
Or you could be like my mother. She's never satisfied either.
I don't want to be a weekend lover.
That makes sense.
But
you know what? I'd die for you.
Is that right?
Yeah. And we can get it. We can do the bat dance together.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Well, we're connecting a lot of dots here.
Yeah, we're party men.
Yeah. That being said, please rate, review, subscribe, or don't. Whatever. Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, man. Put on your diamonds and pearls and leave us alone.
Right. And we will be back next week with the movie formerly known as Purple Rain.
Yep. Bathe yourself in Lake Minnetonka.
I have a feeling that next week will be exhausting as I try to have a conversation with Brian and he only speaks in Prince lyrics. So tune in for that, and we will see you next time
in a game of basketball.
Take a trip with us to Nilbog. Just promise not to drink the goo.
Oh my God!
If you get sucked into the Matrix, we will sing the phone for you.
Do you believe in fate?
But every movie has a plot hole, and every hole gets filled somehow. Whiskey, wine, or blue milk. Just don't cut me off right now. We're the Plotaholics, a breakfast club of 2. We're the Plotaholics, ripping plots apart for you.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.